Welcome back to 30 at 6. I'm here with Amy Rosenkrans. She is a teacher and also local researcher doing research on grassroots activism here in Cecil and Harford counties toward women's suffrage. Thanks so much for being here.
Good evening.
So tell us a bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Women's Heritage Center and this project.
So I am a local historian and a social studies teacher, and I heard about the Maryland Women Heritage Center project. And what it is that they're researching all of the Maryland women suffragists, because as you know, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And their goal was to figure out who those local people were that helped advocate for the 19th Amendment. So I was talking to them and they were talking about all the wonderful people that they had, who were mostly from Baltimore. And I said, well, have you started looking into Harford and Cecil counties yet? And they're like, oh, we haven't found anybody yet. And nobody wants, nobody can do that. And I was like, I'll do it. Yeah. So that's how I kind of got involved. And it's been really interesting to go into the records, whether it be newspapers or other things, and start pulling out the names of these men and women who worked on suffrage in Harford and Cecil County.
So how have you done that? Have you, when you look through those records, how do you search for that specific topic?
So it's really interesting because I go through the old archives for the Cecil Whig and various other, there's a Midland Journal that was a Cecil County newspaper as well. And you first start with suffrage, right? But then isn't that much out there. So you just start, it's like being a detective. You just go in and start putting things in and finding one name, and then it turns to two, and then it turns to more. So it's just one big puzzle that's really interesting to find out.
So on that, what have you found so far?
So we have found that there are a number of Cecil County women who participated in the suffrage movement. Now, the suffrage movement started way back in 1848, but we see that there's a big push in 1912, 1913 to really get the suffrage amendment before Congress. And President Wilson is elected to the presidency in 1912. He's inaugurated in 1913. So there are a group of women who decide they want to make a big deal at his inauguration. So a number of women, led by a woman named General Rosalie Jones, she created an army, and they decided that they were going to march from New York City to Washington, D.C. and stage a huge parade the day before Wilson's inauguration. So obviously, coming from New York City, south to D.C., guess where they pass through? Elkton. They pass through Cecil and Harford counties. And it's really fabulous to read the accounts of what the women encountered. This is 1913 in February. So it was quite interesting weather. And they literally marched the whole way.
Wow. I imagined that was the case, but I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah, they literally marched in February.
And they stayed at the Howard House, which is
they
now
did.
Minnie's.
When they stopped, it's a really couple of interesting stories about their stay in Elkton. The women were a little irritated afterwards about their stay in Elkton. So they come through Elkton. They stay overnight at the Howard House, which is Minahan's now, right? And there is a woman who was one of the lead suffragettes. She was a young, beautiful woman. She saw herself as the baby of the suffragette movement and suffragist movement. And she wrote an entire column for the Brooklyn Daily Eagle about her entire experience coming all the way through. And she was not very complimentary about the Howard House.
What did she say?
I can't remember offhand, but she made a couple of comments about people not being very nice to her and the food not being very good. And she puts it in her column, and then about a month later in the Cecil Whig, there is a letter to the editor talking about how rude this woman, Phoebe Haun, was, how she did not accept their hospitality in the way that it was meant. So it's really interesting. Those kind of stories are the things that pop out that you don't see in your regular U.S. history textbooks. And in doing that, and originally seeing that march from New York down to D.C., then you start picking up in the newspaper articles who the local women are that meet them.
Right.
So I've been able to pull out a number of different names of women who met them on the march, and then after the march was over, it kind of energized this entire suffragist movement in Cecil County, and they started all of these meetings all across the county, and in every little area of Cecil County, every town, they pop up this new women's club. So I have a number of names that I'm looking for more information on.
So why do you think it's so important to research local history and preserve local history?
I think that it's really important to preserve local history because it's really the people at the grassroots, at the local level, who are making things happen. We learn in U.S. history about Susan B. Anthony. We learn about Elizabeth Cady Stanton. But they couldn't have done the work that they did if it hadn't have been for all the women in the little towns and the little cities all across the United States.
Right. So what is the end goal of this project?
The end goal of this project is to document as many Maryland suffragettes as possible. And it's really all about getting the information out to the local communities and saying, hey, what do you have in your attic? What kind of things do you have in your photo album? For instance, last week I gave a talk at the Havre de Grace Opera House, and I showed a couple of pictures of women that I've already been able to find. And already 2 people said, oh, that's my great-grandmother, or
amazing.
That's my husband's great-grandmother. And we've already found some new pictures of suffragists from Harford County. So I'm hoping we can do the same in Cecil.
That is very cool, and I really hope that we get to have you back to talk about the rest of
I'd
your
love to,
findings.
anytime.
Amy Rosenkrans is a teacher and local historian. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.